Who is listed when you search film director? On Google, the top directors are men, and predominantly old white men.
And it's because we have this idea that the great masters are men.
There are only 2 women on this list, the first being Ava DuVernay, listed as the 41st director, and Liv Ullmann as the 48th. According to this list, women only make up 4% of the top directors. But that cannot be right, can it? What about if we add female to the search? Ava DuVernay is now number 2 on the list, only just behind the 2021 Academy Awards Best Director winner Chloe Zhao, who didn't even appear on the previous list. These women listed are no different from the men before. They've made award-winning, box office successful movies, but often they are diminished despite their work because of their gender.
I think when discussing a lot of established and popular directors, the things that you think of first, like with Wes Anderson, you celebrate him for being maybe awkward and straight to the point. And when you're talking about a director that happens to be a woman, generally the first thing that comes up into conversation is the fact that they are. So the fact that we can never quite remove ourselves from our womanhood and kind of be on par with men in these discussions of our work and our inspirations, it's certainly very limiting.
It can feel very intimidating if you don't see people who look like you and share common identities. It can feel very alienating.
It's super important for us to understand who's telling the stories that we're being told, and that people in the industry who are capable of telling certain stories are in the industry.
And this isn't a director-only issue either. This is the reality that all women in the film industry face.
I feel like maybe if it was more 50-50, people really wouldn't care as much. But because women are seen as such an anomaly in the industry, people are like, oh, wow, a female film composer, so exotic.
I see a lot of women producers, a lot of women work in the industry, but are they cinematographers? Are they directors? Are they, creative?
Clearly, there are women who can make films, but where are they if they're not behind the top grossing films? And why do we have to use female to distinguish them between their male counterparts?
I do believe that women have a different way of looking at things. So you've heard in the past, like, do women have a female gaze? I do. I just think that, and I think people from different cultures have a way of looking at things. I think we all have a different way of looking at things, even within our groups of people we identify with. So, but should they be only identified because of that? No, I don't think we should.
We're all kind of in the same page, so why not just call myself like regular filmmaker?
So before we look at the present, let's look to the past. Because did you know, between the years 1900 and 1920s, there are almost more women making films in Hollywood than there are today? Women had more opportunities because of a lack of film industry. It was a melting pot of the masculine technological advancements with the feminine theater industry, something that Professor Karen Mayer found in her research.
The going thesis, was that it was sort of this blank slate of an industry, and so that those roles hadn't been written yet about who could do what. And I rejected that thesis thinking, well, there's no such thing really as a blank industry. It has to come from somewhere. The women that I was looking at, I began to realize had come from the theater. And so I'm like, well, that's the source. So what were they doing in the theater? And then, of course, when I went into that history, it was like, no, they had a lot of power. They ran their own companies and they ran their own theaters. And so when I saw how much power they had in that industry, I'm like, well, that clearly is a huge thread, that they brought all these, not just the skills, but the culture, that everybody had to do something. Like, everybody had to do everything, basically. Like, there was no time to say, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that. Not that there wasn't some traditional, gender skills. It was this very, very flexible environment that I actually didn't see, honestly, in any other industry. And so there was no blank slate. It was imported. And then also the technical side, obviously no blank slate. It comes out of technology, right, which is very male-dominated. And so you have this really interesting meeting of this very gender-fluid practice in theater. And not just gender-fluid, but like women having power, as well as men, but a lot of women. And so they lock, stock, and barrel brought that culture into this early film industry. And so you basically had a partnership between the technical side and the artistic side.
This created a generation of women writing, directing, producing, and editing, holding lead positions in the industry during a time when women didn't even have the opportunity to vote. We had women like Alice Guy Blanchet, the first female director, or Louis Weber, the highest paid director, male or female, in the world. However, despite women's success in early Hollywood, it did not last.
The money that comes in from the East Coast, from Wall Street bankers, are like, well, hey, now this is something that we want to invest in. And then that culture, so it's like a third culture, comes in. So you have like the theater culture where women have a lot of power. Then you have the technology, and then the cameraman system, which is still outrageously masculine. Who can run a camera. And then you have this third culture coming in, which is the Wall Street culture, which is extremely gendered. And so to me, then, of course, that won out in the 1920s when you have the studio system being created.
After the shift in the 1920s, there were a few select who were able to break through during a time when there were no women in top positions, such as Dorothy Arzner in the 1930s and Ida Lupina in the 1950s. In the 1960s, there was a change in Hollywood. The collapse of the studio system, the abolition of the production code, and the rise of TV. Classic Hollywood fell in the wake of New Hollywood and the quote-unquote movie brats, such as Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg. It was also a time when women were feeling unrest and wanting equal opportunities in all aspects of their lives. In recent years, there have been more women directing Hollywood blockbuster movies, such as Patty Jenkins, Kathryn Bigelow, Ava DuVernay, and Chloe Zhao. However, it is still incredibly difficult for women to reach that level of Hollywood blockbuster budgets. According to Dr. Martha Lausen from the Center for the Study of Women in Television and Film, in 2021, women working on the top 250 grossing films only made up 25%.
It's been male-dominated, for so long, just institutionally because of all of the barriers to access and certain notions about, what a director is supposed to be, but really just honestly who those jobs were for.
When it comes to female filmmakers, there's a type of film that people expect us to make, and we don't all necessarily fall into those categories that, are very arbitrary and people make for us before we've even entered the field. When people think of female filmmakers, you usually think of them outside of genres like action and superhero, which is just totally not true. I mean, there's certainly people in the field that are women that are very passionate about these genres and very capable in these genres, but they're kind of ostracized from the beginning if they want to break into them. So I think there's certainly some barriers that need to be broken there, because I think expectations for women can translate into, what people believe we can do and do well and portray well on screen.
My annoyance with the MCU is I think most people's is not the movies in and of themselves. I've enjoyed some of them, smash, whatever, it's fun. But I think it's just that the dominance can make you resentful. The same is true of this, perceived straight white male canon. That sort of knee-jerk defensive rejection of the straight white male filmmakers. And I've been in this place. It leaves you with this way of thinking about film completely ahistorically. And because you basically have to ignore or problematize all of your potential, predecessors or people that you like something of and don't like that of, and you're interested in that. So it's I feel once I sort of let go of that, fuck the canon, whatever, we're out here making new things, doing new forms, doing whatever, which we are. But lots of other people have also done that canonically, and it's actually really fascinating to see how film has evolved as a medium and what different people have done with it and how movements have risen and fallen, and being able to study film history with an open mind. And that's something that we should not lose track of in the desire to make the future of film look pretty different from the past, which should always be the priority anyway,
There's not a lack of women, In fact, women graduate at the same rate from film school as men. However, when they leave the educational setting, their opportunities begin to shrink the higher they try to achieve. This is why we see a lot more women in the independent film space, where women make up 35 to almost 40% of the top positions, and taking advantage of initiatives like Women in Film, created in the mid-70s.
I'm not living in Hollywood of the past. I'm not living in any Hollywood. I'm just sort of here, and there are tons of female filmmakers now.
So much of it is practical information, right? It's those tools. And I think that when there's networks, and I think men have really figured this out, I mean, I think they bring each other up, right? And I think Women in Film was a way that we figured out we could do it for each other, because it was really hard to get into the film industry. So it was really necessary for my career. And I think between Women in Film and the National Film Board, and then the odd little opportunity or incentive that would come up with the funding agencies, is largely how has helped me a lot. I mean, I just can't deny that it's helped.
When there's a strong group of women who are connected and they have their own, abilities or skills to do stuff, when you have all them together, you can do really anything.
I come from a little town over in Germany, so there's really no people that I know here that have ever talked about wanting to work in film. It was a bit of an alienated situation, being like alone with that. But when I went on TikTok, I met all these awesome women who want to work in film, and just people who want to work in film. And I didn't feel, you feel the competition, but you also don't feel alone. You gotta gather a lot of friends.
And I think that's why I appreciate programs like Ava DuVernay's Array, which I'm part of, and being able to eliminate the excuse of we don't know where to find people of color, we don't know where to find women in film, there aren't enough, and creating a database that's specific to that is so important.
Women supporting women, just naturally becoming friends with one another, making cool content together. That's the way to bring more women into the space and inspire the next generation of young girls to feel comfortable to come into the space if they just see that there's a bunch of people who are already doing it.
As much as I want to lift women as directors and writers and editors and producers, I also want to make sure that the productions are equal and that the teams work equally and everyone's treated equally.
And I think of people like Catherine Bigelow, who says she doesn't want to be associated with as being a woman filmmaker. I also understand that point of view. But there's no doubt about it, she's benefited from the work of these organizations who've promoted women, right? She just has. It doesn't mean she has any less talent, but she's benefited from it.
If we don't stick together, if we don't share what we're learning, then we're not really going to break into it, and we're not really going to break the cycle.
The limitless potential of creating on platforms like YouTube and TikTok have developed a space where women can create with little restrictions. I'd argue that content creators are a new kind of filmmakers, developed in the digital era for the digital space.
TikTok, when you think about it, you think there's only teenagers dancing and stuff like that, but it's actually, there are very creative people, especially I've seen very creative young women who do incredible stuff, incredible 10-second long videos, and you could consider them to be art, and that's what I'm really supporting. I think for me, stuff or videos we can see in digital platforms, they can be considered to be art and even films.
Certainly some of the strongest and most popular creators I've found in TikTok are women. And I do think that, at least from what I've seen, the women tend to be more proactive about sharing their own personal work than maybe their male counterparts. And I think something that TikTok is doing, because social media generally seems to do better with the female demographic, is it's giving women the chance to kind of take charge of their niche and tell the narratives and tell the stories and tell the ideas that they have to tell.
It's just been really, really fun to like produce videos about what I love, and I kind of like discovered that talent and embraced it, and it's really cool when you notice that people actually enjoy the stuff you make.
I've kind of taken to TikTok to share my journey a little bit and show behind the scenes of all the projects that I'm working on, and also promote my projects, but also just show people like how you can make films on your own and indie filmmaking side of things.
Like, I feel like it's literally been over the past like 2-3 years that this has happened, where we've had more women like creators who have grown and become a bigger part of the community, but it's still so recent. I do think it's made a big change, but again, it's definitely still, you know, very uneven. I am very excited with how much improvement has happened. Like the graph, if we were to graph it, it'd be going like this, you know, like I feel like I'm excited about where we're going. I definitely think there are more, even just having one, like just one example is sometimes all you need.
I think I'm super excited for our generation to like kind of come up, because I don't know, I feel like there's just so many cool like different kinds of creatives that haven't been given the access. Like with TikTok, like you said, like anyone who's putting in the work can be seen. It's really cool.
As those platforms grow and we see more filmmakers growing in their platform, it will for sure be influencing film altogether. I think that's a new way for indie filmmakers to market, for sure. And I think it's going to push indie films more than ever.
We need to remember that the world is changing all the time. We are getting new digital platforms all the time. Media and art and videos and films, they are just changing their form. So I'm really excited, like, and I really hope that we will get more female like creators from those platforms, and they will get more visibility.
You know, because it's harder for us to be taken seriously as filmmakers, suddenly we have all of this access to potentially go viral overnight, to potentially get a brand deal overnight. And I think that's something that's very alluring to a lot of us.
There's still this mentality that women are too risky to give larger budgets to, that they will not be able to make as good movies as men.
You kind of have to be one step like higher to kind of be at the same level as everyone else, which is not true at all, but it kind of feels like that.
If you're a woman, where like you're like a minority, like they instantly don't think that you're going to be as good as them, or you know what you're talking about, because there's no like, I guess, proof of it. And I just felt like the stuff I was trying to make, I was constantly told I couldn't make what I wanted to make, and like it's stupid, because that's literally why I'm making the commercials and music videos I am, because my perspective's different.
I think that's just part of it. It's just like a mentality people have, where it is really unfortunate that our minds automatically default to a man when you say film composer.
Women and men are not equal. Women are being like a little bit here. So when women do step up and they go here, people are like, okay, calm down, be humble, don't be a bitch, you know? Whereas if a man would say the exact same things or whatever, it would be the most normal thing in the world. It's so, what I'm trying to say is that it's so interesting to see that dynamic, whereas we as women, we're growing and we're stepping up and we're getting into positions of power, and we're getting into, you know, we're getting on panels where, you know, we have, or not we, but like in the US there is now a vice president who's a woman. We're doing these things, but when we're doing these things, we're also just kind of directly or indirectly just being put down, like, no, just, you know, the thing that I keep coming back to is like, be humble. We as women have to be humble, whereas a man would be confident, we would be arrogant, or we would be bragging. And that is just a very interesting dynamic to observe, I guess.
It's the way that competence is sort of baked into whiteness and maleness when it comes to investments and it comes to like corporate leadership, like to this day. Because it really has been unbelievably persistent. The tiny percentage of women and people of color who were able to do films still, like in terms of major films, obviously major theatrical releases, it's usually hovers around like 6 or 7%, something like that, somewhere between like 5 and 10%, say. I think it just spiked recently, but as we know, that's very recent. It actually is the same percentage of corporate leadership. There's like the same lid on how many people of color and how many women are entrusted in these really high positions. which in the film industry, like a microcosm of that was like, well, who's allowed to direct and produce? And I just think it's really interesting that the percentage is like we have a tolerance of about 10%. More than that, not sure.
I finally have made it so I'm doing budgets that are similar to men, because I think it all comes down, our equality now is about the pocketbook. Are we getting paid the same? Are our films getting the same international distribution? Are we running in theaters the same as our male peers? And I think the higher up you go is when you see it, So I certainly think I have the same opportunities at my level to get a decent budget. But am I are they taking risks on things like theatrical distribution? And that's where I think it's like you kind of climb one mountain and you get to the top and you realize, there's another big mountain I have to, and you just get tired, right? Of it, of always proving yourself. I feel continuously like I have to prove myself. Is that because of my gender? Or is it just because my films aren't good enough? I don't know. But these are things you can't help but ask. And that's the subtlety of any ism, right? Things are way better, but are we there yet? I don't think so. But we're a lot better than what it was 35 years ago, let me tell you.
I mean, I see the statistics, and I see it in the field all the time. As an example, this summer I directed a TV series, and somebody took a picture of me and a crew, and I can tell you there were maybe like 15 men and me. When I looked at that, I thought, this is really how it is, and when I go out to productions, often I'm the only girl. For me, it's not an issue. It doesn't bother me. I've learned in my career, and this is just my experience, I have learned the most about the industry from men, and from working with them. As much as I go out to forcefully push the female filmmaking, I don't do it to push away others.
Being a female and working with a team, I think if there are females involved also, then it feels good. It's nothing there because we are mixed. But when you are the only female in a male team and working environment, this might feel a little bit not difficult, but you feel something. I don't know how to explain, but you feel something because you are the only one there who's a female, and there is this energies, and I feel that females have this I don't know, feminine energy. There is something there. We are the beautiful sex, right? We look in a certain way. So in this way, being seen in a completely male environment, maybe it's, I know that men look at me. I feel that I need to push a little bit harder in order to see me as your co-worker and not just as a female. To take me seriously, like 100% seriously, even though it comes from a female voice. I know I can do it without thinking that a female is a minus. I know that we are all equal, and I feel that. I think we are getting somewhere better in the future. I think we have all the tools now.
The label female filmmaker is both useful and problematic at the same time. The label offers opportunities to showcase and highlight women within the industry and to show representation that there are women who are making films. However, the label also diminishes women. It creates an even bigger gap between men and women by insisting on using this label.
Calling them female filmmakers and not just filmmakers, I think it's showing the problem in the industry.
So emphasizing that there are women is a good thing, because I think that if there are any women or girls who want to do what we do, but they feel like, this is a male-dominated industry, so they feel intimidated or they feel scared, so they don't want to do this thing because there aren't a lot of women in there. For that reason, I think it's great, but I personally don't really, I don't know. I see myself as a creator because You know, I want to be treated equally, and I feel like when you label me as a female creator, you're not treating me equally. I'm special. You're putting me in this box of female creator, and I'm like, no, I have something to bring to the table regardless of my gender. Now, like I said, I also totally get, you know, it's not like I'm like, I'm not a female creator, because I get it, and I am happy to be one of the women in this space, and hopefully, I mean, maybe I can even inspire someone to also enter this space, you know. So it's kind of like it's two-sided, you know.
I feel it's very empowering. I've heard someone say that they don't like to be called a female filmmaker because it makes them it separates them from the rest. They just want to be a filmmaker like everyone else, like, you know, the same chances and everything. And I can understand that, and I also use that. I don't take female filmmaker, that expression, too seriously, but I also feel like it's empowering when I say, like, I'm a female cinematographer. I'm here in the time of change, you know.
And I've always been proud to be a female filmmaker, and I've certainly made films about feminist issues. I consider myself a feminist. I've never been ashamed to say that, although it has its limitations too, to do that. I mean, whenever you present yourself that way, it's almost like you're watching a film because you're a female and it's to do with female things. And I don't think that's true at all. I like to think that my films have both a male and a female audience.
But it's not like when I find out that a film was made by a woman, I'm like, oh my God, it was made by a woman. This changes everything. You know, because I don't want people to react to my work that way either. You know, it's sort of the same thing of wanting to stand on your own merits.
I prefer just a filmmaker because I personally don't like the boss lady and stuff like that, because it's saying that it's very special now because of the gender. I don't want to be seen through my gender that much. Of course, I represent something and people read me some way, but more I would like to be seen just as a professional or a person with a passion or vision or stuff like that.
I think that we use labels in regards to whatever your identity is, whatever makes you stand out. I'm a Black female creator. I could use that to help myself stand out. So that's why I think labels are used. I don't think the labels are very useful, personally. I'd much rather be judged off of my content and my output versus my identity. At the end of the day, I consider myself a creator. Yes, I am a Black female creator, but that is not what my identity is. My identity is, and it goes really deep, but in this context, my identity is being a creative person.
It has become quite clear, like, why can I not like call myself a filmmaker? Because I have those ideas and I have those visions. So
I think the term female filmmaker can be really comforting for some. I think because the film industry can be so isolating toward women, it can be super nice to feel like there's a category you belong to in this, that there's somewhere that you belong, that there's a group of people that you can relate to. So I definitely think that the phrasing has its place, but at the same time, it bothers me that we can't exist in a broader space simply as filmmakers.
If everything would be so simple, we would all just call them ourselves filmmakers.
And then I had a conversation with Dr. Alison Pierce, who's a horror film professor in the UK. And she wrote a book called The Women Make Horror, and had a little section where she spoke about female filmmakers shouldn't be defined by their gender any more than men should be. And the reason that we do say female filmmaker is because men are the status quo, and so there is a separation there. And my goal is that, you know, in 50 years, it is just filmmakers. But until then, I feel like we have to push ourselves in there and make the statement.
I'm okay with being that, but I would love to be just a filmmaker for sure.
Quite proud to be a filmmaker, and especially like woman and a filmmaker.